India is one of the most polluted countries of the world. The outdoor air is polluted and is growing at an alarming rate, bringing with it a lot of health problems. To share her perspective on the impact of indoor air pollution, the extent to which it matters, and the kind of prioritization, focus and attention the issue has been getting from the government, we were joined by Secretary at New Delhi Municipal Council, Dr. Rashmi Singh, IAS.
I'd like to tell you that there are two ways in which we, kind of respond to address the problem of air pollution. One is regulatory, and the other is promotive. In the regulatory, there are many acts, which we are bound to look at the statutory compliances. Say the C&D waste, which is the construction and demolition waste. So I would encourage you to also look at what the legal provisions are, because the legal provisions do mandate and cast a certain responsibility on those who are at the helm of, be it in this case, say the construction industry. So, then the plastic waste management rules. And the third is, I would say, the solid waste management rules. So, these are some of the acts that we look at. Then number two is the promotive role. And here it is very important now that the discussion, which I saw happening over here, in terms of being, first of all, conscious of what we are living in terms of our environment, the workspace. So where does that consciousness start from? It has to start young. Because somebody just said that, is it really a part of the curriculum, for the children? And earlier probably it was not, that much of a discourse, and our science books, our textbooks, whether science or civic books, which teaches us our constitutional responsibilities, our fundamental rights and duties, would probably not talk about this dimension. But I must say that today, for most of the schools, which are looking at, making our children more globally informed and last with solutions to the contemporary challenges, they are, right from the early age, trying to impart the consciousness which it needs for every child to know what it means to have pure air and impure air and the detrimental effect it will have on our health.
The impact of air pollution on our health is well known. But what is not so well known is how serious is the issue of indoor air pollution and how it impacts the health of employees who typically spend almost 90% of their office hours indoor. Moving to the last session of the event, we were joined by internationally renowned medical expert and consultant respirologist at PD Hinduja National Hospital and Medical Research Center, Dr. Lancelot Pinto, in a fireside chat with editor of Economic Times Energy World, Sudhir Pal Singh.
I would like to begin, Doctor, by asking you I like to keep things broad. So let's first try and understand what is indoor air pollution all about. And basically, if you can help us understand, so the larger perception that the larger public understanding of pollution is about power plants, spewing emissions into the atmosphere. So is that linked to indoor air pollution, and how? What are the sources? How harmful it is? What is its impact? So the basics of it.
To answer your question, an average human breathes about 1,000 liters of air a day to get oxygen, right? That's the purpose of breathing. I view indoor air pollution as anything that enters the lungs, anything that enters our system beyond what is necessary, which is the oxygen, and which hampers life to a certain extent in whatever way possible. So there is, this visuals about outdoor air pollution. Of course, there's a strong correlation between outdoor and indoor air pollution. If you're in an openly ventilated area, the air outside and the air inside are going to be similar. But most of us nowadays live in artificial environments indoors. We live in air-conditioned environments. The whole idea is to improve productivity. The whole idea is to simulate an environment in which a human being performs to the best of their potential in terms of work. So it has to be comfortable, not too cold, not too warm, right humidity, right lighting, right, we try and create a nice artificial environment. The flip side of that is that we often are not breathing the air which is outside. That can be good, that can be bad. If your air outside is really terrible, You have an excellent opportunity. As someone earlier mentioned this morning that the air on campus is better than the air off campus. So you have an excellent opportunity to make things better. If the air outside is pristine and you are adding to it as a consequence of the activities that you do within your workspace, then something needs to be done about that. So I think this is kind of air pollution indoors in a nutshell.
Doctor, you said, you talked about right kind of environment that we want to, create for ourselves. So which makes me think that you're talking about development, right? So I want to understand, are you saying that the kind of indoor air pollution that we have, that's let's say a byproduct of the kind of development we are having, and we are not, there's something that we are not doing fundamentally right, right? So in the same breath, if you could help us explain, help us understand, what are the chief differences between, let's say, a developed nation and a developing nation like India, in the sense of indoor air pollution? What are the chief characteristics? What is happening to us? What is it that we are not doing right?
Sure. So, as far as the workplace is concerned, my reading of the literature tells me that, the whole problem began somewhere in the 1970s, where there was a huge fuel crisis, as a result of which everybody was out there trying to figure out ways to make life more energy efficient. You wanted to use as less fuel as possible. As part of this, buildings were constructed in a design where energy consumption was low. Therefore, you didn't want your air circulated over and over again. You wanted to keep that as low as possible, because the moment you bring in external air, you have to condition it, and that costs energy. The analogy that you can think of is your car air conditioning. If you shut down your windows and you have two options of air conditioning your car, either circulate the same air or bring in outside air. If you circulate the same air, the fuel that your car will use is less than if you bring in outside air. So yes, as a consequence of development and the energy conservation that industries wanted to do, we created these environments in which air was not circulated freely. The WHO, in fact, coined a term in the 90s called the sick building syndrome. The sick building syndrome was an environment in which people went to work and for some reason started having all sorts of funny things. Their eyes would get itchy, they would feel like they have a viral all the time, they would get headaches, they would get sinusitis-like symptoms. And that kind of led to the evolution of the field in terms of trying to figure out ways to make it better. This led to certain standards. So the standards talk about 20 liters per person per hour, which per minute. So 20 liters per person per minute is the number of air, is the amount of air that needs to be circulated. And there are lots of studies which have been done since then. So 20 was the bare minimum, and these bare minimums were defined as what made people happy. So if a person entered a room and felt uncomfortable, that was considered as bad. And from there, they came up with these values. But it's found that if you strive to do better than this 20, if you go from 20 to 40, productivity has shown to be increased significantly. So there is a large study from Harvard which showed that cognitive performance went up by about 8 percentiles, and that converted, they did a rough math on that, and they said that it converts to about $6,500 a year per person, and that came at the cost of about $40 a person. So people assume that these engineering tasks cost a lot of money, but in reality, it's very, very cost efficient. So to answer your second question in terms of the third world versus the first world, when you're talking about indoor air pollution as a broad term, the third world uses a lot of biomass fuels. So a lot of disease that I see in India is a disease called chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. And in the West, the leading cause of COPD is cigarette smoking, while as in India, the leading cause seems to be biomass fuel exposures. So if you're in a closed, unventilated room and you're cooking with biomass fuels, the particulate matter that you generate as a result of that can cause significant lung problems later in life. This might also spill over to the workplace, because at the end of the day, if a lot of people are burning a lot of things outside, it's the same particulate matter which will find its way through into the workplace. Just as an example, there was a modeling study which was done with these mosquito coils. Anybody want to guess how much particulate matter does a mosquito coil generates in comparison to a cigarette? So it's about the equivalent of 100 cigarettes. One coil generates 2.5, your PM 2.5, which is somewhere close to 100 cigarettes. It generates formaldehyde, which is the equivalent of about 50 cigarettes or so. So there's a lot of indoor air pollution from things like biomass fuels, from things like burning stuff. Traditionally, we know for a lot of ceremonies, things are burnt, agarbattis are burnt. There are studies which show that individuals who deal with these burning things, like pandits, like, religious people, tend to have far worse lung disease than those who don't. So all of these contribute in a third world country to indoor air pollution.
A lot of helpful tips there that we can include on an immediate basis. in our everyday life. And ladies and gentlemen, that essentially made for a wonderful note upon which to close the ET Realty Workspace Efficiency Summit.
This is a very good initiative to get different people, different stakeholders sitting together, somebody from the government, somebody from different people from private enterprise, the medical perspective of things, all sitting together and discussing a problem that is very real and needs to be taken a lot more seriously than it currently is being taken. I think initiatives like this plant seeds for future work to be done in the area, and I think it's a great first step.
I think it's fantastic. So we have to involve corporates, we have to sensitize all the employees that work at this corporate, because it cannot just be about having good air at work. It's got to be the other 14, 16 hours of the day when people leave their offices, there's got to be good air as well. The only way to reverse air pollution is through making this a vote bank issue, and everybody needs to get involved. Every resident, every corporate, it's got to be a collective effort. If we think the government is going to wave a magic wand and fix the problem, it's not going to happen.
Partnered by Times Influence.